Good morning. Many thanks for being with us today. So many. We are glad that you reacted so warmly to the invitation of the Embassy of Japan and of the Institute of International Relations to join us for a seminar on maritime security, always very topical, especially for our two countries, Japan and Greece. I would like also to extend a warm welcome to our guest, Professor Sagara, for being with us today, and to the Embassy of Japan and His Excellency Ambassador Ito for endorsing this initiative. To say that we have common ground with Japan is the least. Despite the geographic distance, our countries have much in common. We are both the product of very ancient civilizations. In Japan, there was always a vivid influence of the ancient Greek civilization, and many distinguished scholars established the cultural similarities. We are both maritime nations. Our power derives mostly from the sea, and it is based upon the courage and the hard work of men and women crossing the oceans. And we are both status quo nations. We are located at critical geographical regions, but we are not looking at changing the way of cohabitation with our neighbors. We believe in peace, stability, and cooperation that lead to prosperity. For all these reasons, we strongly believe that the exchange between institutions like this and Japanese research centers should increase to ensure that a better understanding of both nations' foreign policy and security priorities are discussed and disseminated to the successor generations to the benefit of the principles our countries serve. Thank you very much for being with us today. We are going now to broadcast a video message by the Minister of Maritime Policy, Christos Stylianidis, who unfortunately, due to a family unexpected. His mother passed away recently, so he could not be with us, but he sent us a message that we are going now to see. Thank you very much again.
Dear Ambassador Ito, dear Mrs. Aventoli, dear Inom, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank the Institute of International Relations, especially the Institute's Executive Director, my friend Ino Aventoli, and of course, the Embassy of Japan for their kind invitation. At this very interesting, really interesting seminar on maritime security, an issue of paramount importance for the global maritime community. Unfortunately, personal reasons, the passing away of my mother in Cyprus, do not allow me to be with you in person. Dear friends, for hundreds of years, shipping has been the backbone of the global economy. We all know that 90% of the world's commodities are transported by sea. Today, the shipping industry sails in an increasingly complicated operational and geopolitical environment. Old and new threats to the freedom of navigation range, from cyber attacks and piracy to regional security issues and environmental challenges. More recently, trends for regionalization and protectionism have sent with some signals. These developments have undermined severely the smooth and secure transit of global trade. This, in turn, has a negative impact on the development of global economy. Geopolitical instability and conflicts, such as the attacks by Houthis, militants in the Red Sea, are an extra layer of concern for ship operators around the world. They therefore need to remain on alert and be well prepared to face not only the natural challenges at sea, but also the changing circumstances that affect the sea routes. We all know the severe and long-term effects ongoing military conflicts have on maritime trade. Furthermore, the rise of the so-called dark shadow fleet jeopardizes navigational safety, the seafarers' well-being, and of course, the maritime environment. To address the challenge and mitigate negative effects, Greece works closely with its partners in the International Maritime Organization (IMO). We support relevant IMO initiatives and measures aimed at preventing unlawful operation of the so-called dark or shadow fleet. We hope that the proposed regularly scoping exercise will be widely supported in the upcoming legal committee and have a positive impact. This is a measure co-sponsored by Greece and over 30 member states. It aims to strengthen the existing framework to prevent illegal activities by the dark fleet. Ladies and gentlemen, as regulators and policymakers, it is our obligation to provide clear and balanced guidance to our industry. I recognize that this is difficult sometimes, but necessary nonetheless. We need to ensure to the maximum degree that safety and security are not compromised. To that end, a continuous and rigorous assessment of international policies and laws is required. We must scrutinize and refine our legal instruments to ensure that they keep up with technological advances and the changing nature of maritime risks. Such actions will ensure that the shipping industry remains secure, resilient, and ready to face the increasing global transportation demands and challenges. Equally pressing is the discussion about the maritime sector's environmental impact in climate change. It is critical to strike a realistic balance that promotes environmental protection and at the same time acknowledges the realities and financial capabilities of the shipping, but also of the fuel industry. This is essential to shield the maritime sector competitiveness. Dear friends, last but not least, we must recognize the critical importance of developing the human capital, the backbone of our industry. The combination of advanced technical knowledge and critical soft skills is required for both current and future seafarers. So we must invest in retraining our experienced professionals and inspiring the next generation. By doing so, we will cultivate a workforce that is not only capable of meeting modern challenges, but also deeply committed to the timeless values of the maritime heritage. Dear friends, working together for robust maritime security is the only way to ensure that our industry continues to be the backbone of global commerce. Thanks once again for your invitation. Thank you for your attention, and I wish every success to this really very interesting seminar.
Now I have the pleasure and honor to give the floor to the Ambassador of Japan, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Executive Director Afenduli. So look at the sky. It's a very lovely day. Well, maybe today is not the best day for staying inside and discussion, but it's so important to go out. So let's get started. So His Excellency Minister Stylianidis and Executive Director Afenduli, Professor Ifandis, my fellow ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, online viewers, Kalimera, good morning. Thank you for joining us today for this seminar on maritime security, co-organized by the Embassy of Japan in Greece and the Institute of International Relations, IDIS, of Pantheon University. I extend my sincere gratitude to His Excellency Minister Stylianidis, Minister of Maritime Affairs and Insular Policy, for sending a message to our seminar at a very difficult moment of his life. My sincere condolences for the loss of your beloved mother. My thanks also go to Professor Ifandis and the IDIS members for their contribution in organizing this seminar, as well as to all speakers and moderators from Japan and Greece. Japan and Greece are maritime nations. As people living with oceans and seas over thousands of years, we have known freedom of navigation and maritime security are essential not only for trade and other economic activities, but for exchange of cultures and knowledge. In short, free and safe maritime traffic is a foundation of our life. When Prime Minister Mitsotakis and then Prime Minister of Japan Kishida had a meeting 2 years ago in Tokyo, the two leaders expressed their commitment to free, open, and stable seas, and recognized each other's important role as maritime nations. Two prime ministers noted in the joint statement on strategic partnership that safety of navigation, free and open sea lanes, and promotion of the shipping industry are among our top priorities. Today, I am pleased to host this seminar for further strengthening our partnership on maritime affairs based on a common understanding between our two prime ministers. This seminar will explore various aspects of maritime security, with a particular focus on economic security. Recent global developments have highlighted the increasingly intertwined nature of economic and security issues. The rapid advancement of AI and other technologies has further accelerated this trend. We must recognize the critical importance of securing sea lanes that connect the free and open Indo-Pacific region and the Mediterranean Sea, along with vital infrastructures such as ports. These maritime routes are lifelines for global trade and cooperation. And I'm also glad that Mr. Yoshiyuki Sagara, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Geoeconomics and the Asian Pacific Initiative, will join us in this seminar. He is one of the top specialists on international politics and economics in Japan. His insights will certainly contribute our discussion on complex issues of the current international maritime affairs. Although Greece and Japan are far away each other, seas and oceans closely connect us together. For our two countries, a top priority in the respective foreign policy is to uphold the maritime global order under international laws, including UNCLOS. Greece is a major shipping country, and Japanese shipyards build 1/3 of ships owned by Greek ship owners. We are here today aiming at exploring how Japan and Greece further improve our partnership through cooperation in maritime affairs. I believe today's seminar will turn out to be another important step for our two countries to find even broader common grounds for future cooperation. I wish you all fruitful discussion and successful conclusion. Thank you very much.
Arigato. Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. And now I will invite my good friend, Professor Ifandis, the president of IDIS, to take my seat and moderate the session with Professor Sagara and our discussion.
Well, good morning to everybody, and let me also join the ambassador, His Excellency the Ambassador, and my friend and colleague in Ofenduli in thanking the Japanese Embassy for its reaching out to the Institute of International Relations of Pantheon University. The Institute's focus on we have been developing an acute interest and a focus on a region which is most interesting, which is geopolitically and geoeconomically extremely important, but also culturally fascinating and attractive. The Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, is where the heart of global economy is pounding as we speak, and it's most probably where the next constellation of international politics will be played out and formed. Usually, the capacity of this room is enough for what we are running, but not today, which is a strong indication of how important the topic is. And without further ado, let me invite Mr. Sangara. We are privileged to host him here, and the floor is yours. I apologize already. I told him that in Japan, I know they are very punctual. In the Mediterranean, we are.
Yeah, thank you, Edis, for having me today. It's really a pleasure and privilege for me to visit Greece. Actually, this is my first time to visit Greece, it's really honor for me. So thank you, Executive Director of Venturi, and also Professor Ifantis for inviting me. And also, I truly appreciate the kind of message from Minister Stylianidis in his very difficult moment. And also, thank you, Ambassador Ito, for inspiring remarks. So, as already discussed, Japan and Greece have long nurtured a rich culture through maritime trade. And Japan is an island nation surrounded by the sea on all sides, and Greece, with its many islands on the Asian Sea and also the Mediterranean Sea, and Greece has played an important role in the formation of global history and culture. So today, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about geopolitics and also geoeconomics in the Indo-Pacific region. And also I will discuss the global supply chain issues and also the issues on seaports. So geopolitics is a way of looking at the behavior of nations based on their history and resources with a focus on geographic conditions such as oceans and continents. After the Cold War, trade, finance, and the movement of people spread globally. And that accelerated by the internet. And as digitization progressed, the world seemed to be flattening in 1990s. So geopolitics was forgotten at that time. However, crises happened since 2010. The Syrian conflict, the European refugee crisis, China's expansion into the South China Sea, and Russia's invasion of Crimea, they made it clear that international politics is never free from geopolitical conditions. And in addition, the weight of economic factors in geopolitical competition and the domestic politics is increasing, and the mixing of security and economics is becoming the new norm. Therefore, geoeconomics has come to be emphasized, Geoeconomics analyzes not only geographical conditions, history, and resources, but also economic factors in response to these changes in the international relations. And so 3 years ago, the International House of Japan, launched the Institute of Geoeconomics, and I served for the senior research fellow. I previously served for my government, the Japanese government, and also before that, also I served for United Nations for 5 years. And so we now know that we are facing many challenges. In Asia, Japan faces the most challenging and complex security environment since the end of World War II. Japan faces 2 nuclear powers, Russia to the north and China to the west. And North Korea has conducted 6 nuclear tests from 2006 to 2017. Japan's southwest islands are very close to Taiwan. The Taiwan Strait is approximately 130 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. On the other hand, the distance between Japan's westernmost island, Yonaguni Island, and Taiwan is only about 110 kilometers. So the Taiwan contingency is also a contingency for Japan. So Japan has been advocating the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, to bring peace and prosperity to the region. It will make the Pacific Rim a sea of fertility, and from Japan, Southeast Asia, Australia, and Latin America to the United States and Canada. So that Pacific Rim, so Japan's the free and open Indo-Pacific concept is aiming to bring peace and prosperity, and it should extend from the Pacific Ocean across the Indian Ocean through the Middle East and into the Mediterranean. So here, at the gateway from the Indo-Pacific to Europe is Greece. And in the center of Eurasia, you know that Ukrainian troops are fighting valiantly against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the Russian army has deployed North Korean soldiers to the front line. So European security and Northeast Asian security are intersecting in Kursk. So these changes in international affairs are being discussed as the advent of a new era of geoeconomics. In the contemporary world, close economic interdependence has been established between major countries, even that were in strategic rivalry such as US and China. And rather, the strategic significance of the economy is increasing, being recognized. And the international economy is also becoming more and more colored as an arena for power struggles among nations. So the problem of US-China competition and the increasing tariffs among US, Canada, and Mexico are ironically the result of globalization's full global reach through trade and finance. So Japan has close trade relationship with its neighbor China. However, since 2010, China started to weaponize the economic interdependency between Japan and China. In addition, responding to China's promotion of the One Belt, One Road, or BRI initiative, has deepened. The US-China confrontation has been becoming severe. So in 2022, we all know that Russia invaded Ukraine and sanctions against Russia, and Europe has been suffering from the energy disruption and inflation. So looking back 2024 was the year of elections around the world. There was a trend that the ruling parties lost their seats. And behind the defeats, most countries were struggled by COVID pandemic and inflation. And this year, with the change of the US administration from the Biden to the Trump administration, many geoeconomic challenges have erupted at once within just 2 months. They include trade, tariffs, border control, development assistance, energy, finance, currency, and sanctions. So I think we are now living in the age of geoeconomic turbulence. So in this age of geoeconomic turbulence, the strategic competition between the US and China and the unilateralism of the Trump administration has led to more geoeconomic turmoil. So based on that, I would like to talk about two geoeconomic agenda, which are global supply chain and port security. So first on global supply chain. After the Cold War, supply chain for goods become globalized. Of particular importance, China has been a place of supply and the market. And the private companies have strived to build value chains that deliver products to consumer quickly as well as efficiently. Moreover, consumer preferences have become more diverse. So speed is of the essence in the market, and the digitization and AI-based demand forecasting are becoming important. So in other words, just in time was the key to supply chain management. Many Japanese companies have also been expanding their operations by moving their production bases from Japan to China. And the global stretched value chain was suddenly severed in 2011 in Japan due to the Great East Japan earthquake on March 11th, 2011. Due to the massive earthquake and the tsunami, one semiconductor plant shut down its operation. And this one small closure led to stop production lines of several Japanese automakers. And the automobile industry is the Japan's key core industry. So it's like a semiconductor industry in Taiwan. So there was a huge shock just because of one closure of a plant. And although the importance of semiconductors is now recognized around the world, Japanese companies already realized that in 2011. 6 months earlier, in September 2010, a Chinese fishing boat hit a Japanese Coast Guard patrol boat off the Senkaku Island in the East China Sea. The Japan Coast Guard arrested the captain of the Chinese fishing boat. Then the Chinese government drastically restricted rare earth exports to Japan. At that time, Japan depended on China for about 90% of its rare earth imports, and China weaponized that economic dependence on rare earth. Then Prime Minister Kan decided to release the Chinese captain to resolve the situation, considering the Japan-China relations. And after that, there were two types of response against the 2010 rare earth shock in Japan. One was trying to reduce Japan's dependence on China for rare earth, so which included some Japanese government officials worked with universities and businesses to develop rare earth saving technologies and to promote the reuse and the recycling of rare earth. And the Japanese government also supported overseas mining of rare earths. So Japan increased imports from Australia, Vietnam, and Canada to diversify the supply chains of rare earths. And now the dependency on rare earths on China reduced from 90% to about 60% now. Another response in Japan was to do nothing or even increase trade with China. So because the diversification of supply chain is costly and the rare earth shock affected only a few industries such as electronics and automobiles, China is too attractive a country for Japanese companies to focus on economic efficiency and the international division of labor. However, doing business in China has become more difficult since the passage of the anti-spying law in 2014 and the national security law in 2015. Since 2014, 17 Japanese citizens have been detained in China. And it is truly sad to see a few Japanese business executives are detained in China, as the Japanese, have been deepening exchanges between China and Japan and expanding business together with Chinese co-workers. So overall, Japan continued to deepen its economic dependence on China even after the 2010 rare earth shock. Then in 2020, the COVID hit Japan. And during the first half of 2020, Japan was unable to secure masks and other personal protective equipment, or PPEs, such as medical gowns and also ventilators and other supplies that have been dependent on imports from China. These items were considered as commodities before COVID. However, they suddenly became strategic items to save lives and health of citizens. Even more serious were the logistics stoppage, including maritime logistics, and also the shortages of semiconductors. So this led to a strong recognition of the need for supply chain resilience around the world. So the COVID was the true wake-up call for Japan. So like US and other European countries, it was the moment the Japanese government realized the I would say over-dependence on China. So diversify supply chain so that we are not dependent on any single point of failure is the new strategic objectives. So as for the Japanese experience, it is important to point out that the Japanese Prime Minister at the time during COVID, especially in the first wave of COVID, was Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe was Japan's longest-serving prime minister and known for his keen geopolitical and geoeconomic sense. In China, in 2012, the Xi Jinping's administration came to power, and in 2017, in America, President Trump came to power. So it's not new. 8 years ago, Trump's first declaration as president was to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, a trade agreement that had been promoted by the Obama administration. So the TPP was originally initiatives of ASEAN, the Southeast Asian countries, and it was a geopolitical concept for building a free trade system based on rules in Pacific. However, President Trump declared to withdraw from the TPP from the perspective that the free trade or low tariffs were a threat to traditional American industry. And one of the hallmarks of the Trump administration is its America First unilateralism. And it has declared its withdrawal from the TPP, the Paris Agreement, the WHO, and other multilateral frameworks. So this has created a vacuum in the international community. So during the first half of Trump administration, I was serving for United Nations, and I was in New York. And the late half of the Trump administration, I came back to Tokyo, and I was serving for my Japanese government, and I was working for North Korea issues. And so what I saw then was a huge vacuum in the international community. And China and Japan tried to fill the vacuum. As we all know, China promoted the BRI initiative, and Japan, on the other hand, promoted the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific and the CPTPP, which is a free trade agreement without the US. So FOIP, the free and open Indo-Pacific, and the CPTPP were promoted by Abe administration, which had a keen geoeconomic sense, as I mentioned. So the first Trump administration raised tariffs on China, and which intensified the US-China confrontation. And as I mentioned, during the late half of 2010s, China was seemed to be kind of friend for many Japanese, and also for many Japanese industries, and it continues. But some diplomats and some government officials deployed to United States read some signals from Trump administration in 2017 and 2018. And a few members in the Prime Minister Abe's office started to prepare for the US-China rivalries. And it led to the establishment of economic security policy within the Japanese government. And so, as I mentioned, the COVID crisis was a wake-up call for Japan. And after Prime Minister Abe stepped down, the following Suga administration also continued to support supply chain resilience and made progress on reshoring from China. So in short, after COVID, supply chain management changed from just in time to just in case. So pandemics, disasters, wars, and conflicts, they can disrupt supply chains. So companies now realize that they have to take some risks, and they began to diversify supply chains. And so in 2022, the Japanese government enacted Economic Security Promotion Act, and under that, Kishida administration and also Japanese government has been promoting and also supporting the diversification of supply chain. And what's important here is that, and also it's a challenge for many countries, including Europe and actually also South Korea, Taiwan. The challenge for governments was to identify what are the strategic items in light of national interests. So I call it targeting process. So targeting is always challenging because for the government doesn't have much information about industries, and industries always have interests in business market. So there are conflicts of interests. And I just want to share 3 approaches Japanese government took. The one is the Japan's Cabinet Office and also the Ministry of State for Economic Security served as strategic coordinator or control tower within the government. And the second is the comprehensive review of supply chain, and it was the end-to-end supply chain review under the jurisdiction of each ministry. So it was just not under Ministry of Trade, it also under Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Transportation, and they reviewed the supply chains. And also third is and I think this is most important, is the strategic dialogue between government and the industries. So I regularly discuss policymakers from European countries, US, South Korea, Asia, Taiwan, but it's quite unique to see Japan's position to having such kind of the private public partnership. And I think that's the most important on this very difficult time. And Japan has targeted 12 items. So it started from semiconductors, storage batteries, critical mineral, natural gas, permanent magnets, industrial robots, electronic components, aircraft parts, ship parts, and so forth. And the Japanese government provides grants and loans to support the diversification of supply chains. However, it is not 100% support by the government. The government contributes only 1/3 or 50% of required budget, depending on items, because the main actor of the economic security is the industry, the private entities. So the last thing I'd like to talk about supply chain is the concept of de-risking, which is originated from Europe. In March 2023, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen gave a keynote speech in Brussels, and she outlined her vision for a new de-risking approach to the EU's relation with China. And after that, the Biden administration's executives like Jake Sullivan and also Secretary Blinken also started to use the word de-risking. And in May 2023 in Hiroshima, G7 leaders adopted a statement titled Economic Resilience and Economic Security. So while the communique avoided addressing China by name, it confirmed that the G7 would work together to economic resilience and economic security based on de-risking rather than decoupling. And it was quite impressive development of the de-risking concept from Brussels via Washington, D.C. and to Hiroshima. Biden administration also advocated a similar concept, which is a small yard high fence. And now it is hard to hear such strategic, well-crafted concepts from Trump administration. But I still believe that the de-risking originated from Europe is the core of supply chain resilience. And to find the right yard to target and the right height of fence to protect or promote supply chains, public-private strategic dialogue is essential. So I think it's still relevant to promote the idea of de-risking. So next I will discuss ports, which is a focal point, or which is becoming the next yard to protect or promote. And it's becoming the next area for the US-China rivalry. So seaports are the linchpins of global commerce, from food, energy, daily commodities to semiconductors and automobiles. In the age of geoeconomic turbulence, maritime gateways face compounded risks. Modern ports are highly sophisticated, and which is a convergence of massive physical assets and complex digital systems. This makes ports vulnerable on multiple fronts, from cyber attacks and espionage to physical damage from disasters or conflicts. Today, port logistics and vessel traffic are coordinated by information systems, and also cranes and cargo handling equipment are often remotely controlled. This digital backbone exposes ports to cyber intrusions that can cripple operations. So a stark example was the 2017 NotPetya malware attack. NotPetya first attacked Ukraine, then quickly spread globally. And as you may know, it hit Maersk, one of the world's largest shipping lines, and brought down IT systems at 76 port terminals that Maersk operated. The company had to halt operations and revert to manual processes for weeks, and ultimately suffering an estimated around 300 million in losses from that one cyber incident. So this incident revealed that a single sophisticated malware attack can ripple across global port networks and causing cargo delays worldwide. And NotPetya was attributed to state-sponsored actors associated with the Russian government. And then the US, UK, and other Five Eyes intelligence partners have publicly blamed Russia for the NotPetya attacks. And now, cyber threat to port operation is a serious issue for Japanese ports. In July 2023, a terminal system at Nagoya port halted its operations. And both loading and unloading of containers were stopped because of the cyber attacks. And the port of Nagoya is located in the center of Japan. And actually, Nagoya port ranked first in Japan for more than 20 years in both volume of cargo and also value of trade. And the Nagoya port is well known for the export of automobiles. As I mentioned, automobile is a key industry in Japan, and Nagoya is close to the home base of Toyota. So what happened at the Nagoya port was unauthorized access through a vulnerability in remote devices, and that was infected the system with ransomware, and it encrypted all data in the data center. So the cyber attack caused the Nagoya port to lose port functions for 2.5 days. So Japan's largest port lost controls or lost operations almost for 2.5 days, and which affected the loading and unloading schedules of 37 vessels, and an estimated 20,000 containers were impacted from the cyber attack. So automobile manufacturers were forced to suspend their operations, and resulted in a tremendous impact on the supply chain. So the Japanese authority found that the attack was carried out by Lockbit, and Lockbit is an international cybercrime group based in Russia. Lockbit was well known for its ransomware attacks. And now I would like to introduce one more very different example of a cyber attack in Japan. Japan is made up of more than 14,000 islands, and the Japanese islands stretch from the Sea of Okhotsk in the north and all the way down to the East China Sea in the south. Out of those islands, Japan consists of 4 main islands, and the smallest island is Shikoku Island. Shikoku is known for its beautiful mountains and rivers. And in Shikoku, there was a small town named Tsurugi Town, and with a population of just around 6,000. So it's a very small, beautiful town in Shikoku Island. In 2021, a local hospital in Shikoku called Handa Hospital was hit under ransomware attack. And the medical record data was encrypted and making it impossible to accept patients. And the hospital managed to resume seeing patients by utilizing paper record, but it took 2 months to restore its electronic medical record system. A police investigation has identified the hacker who attacked the Handa hospital in the small, beautiful town was the Lockbit. The same hacker attacked the Nagoya port, the largest port in Japan. So now there are 4 lessons learned from the cases. First is that hackers are launching attacks randomly against port, hospitals, schools, government agencies, private companies, and so forth. So what hackers are looking for are security holes, so as vulnerabilities in VPN equipment or any servers. And that could have been prevented if the system had been updated regularly. And so, for example, one example is that North Korea previously hacked a financial institution to steal money. And the attack was very sophisticated, but all in all, intelligence community identified that the financial institution was targeted because it used old Windows OS that were no longer supported, and North Korea-related hackers found that vulnerabilities and attacked. So cyber attacks and exploiting those vulnerabilities, those mix of challenges are increasing right now. And the Japanese are also facing many cyber attack incidents. And so, for example, last year, the Japanese government found that a single IP address, such as one computer or one server, was under an attempt of attack once every 13 seconds. So there are massive billions, hundreds of billions of attacks were observed in Japan. And that's not, of course, in Japan. I heard that ports and the university in Greece have also been hit by cyber attacks. So the first lesson is to ensure basic cybersecurity measures, such as system updates or updates from old Windows OS. It was actually very important. And the second lesson learned from the Japanese cases is that importance of trust building between private entities and government entities. And if government entities were able to distill lessons or even good practices from incidents, the governments also should disseminate such knowledge products to the public. Oftentimes, when private entities are subjected to a cyber attack, they try to hide it and also handle it quietly. But it does not stop the hackers. That will make the next victims. So government and the police should be trusted advisors to reach out and consult with. And if there is any incident, companies or any private entities are they are advised to consult with government. And the Handa hospital case, that was a small hospital in Shikoku, maybe they are so brave to conduct an after-action review from the cyber attack, and they published the after-action review report. So you can read, although it's in Japanese, but you still can read the report. And based on the report, the Japanese government created an educational video based on the after action review. And the video is used to raise awareness around cybersecurity in Japan. And the third lesson is the importance of international cooperation. So the main members of the Lockbit, the Russian hackers, which attacked Nagoya port and Handa hospital, were arrested in 2024. And this was a joint investigation by Europol and the US FBI and the police forces of 10 countries, including Japan, the UK, France, and Australia. So it's a very difficult time to persuade international cooperation. It's still very important to promote such cooperation. And the fourth lesson is that even if cyber attack is randomly conducted, any damage to critical infrastructure services, including seaports, or transportation, or telecommunication, can affect the lives and health and also wealth of the people. And therefore, government are needed to maintain stable provision of critical infrastructure. And Japan has been promoting to maintain a stable provision of critical infrastructure, and the government identified several essential infrastructure services. But initially, the government didn't include seaports. So it included airports or telecommunication or water supply. And after the incident in Nagoya port, seaports were added to the essential services. In the US, and actually United States also paid close attention to those actions by the Japanese government. And the Biden administration was also concerned about over 80% of ship-to-shore cranes used to load and unload cargo at the ports. And those 80% of cranes are made in China. So it was a concern for Biden administration. And also there were also concerns about the prevalence of the Chinese-made port control system Login-K in Southeast Asia. So ship-to-shore cranes in seaports were one of the last extended yard to protect by Biden administration. And of course, in the US Congress, Republicans have shown more severe, hard attitude towards Chinese cranes, the ship-to-shore cranes, even before the inauguration of second Trump administration. And so there was a strong need and a demand from the Congress, and there was a concern raised by the Congress to monitor shipments or transportation data was monitored by Chinese authorities. So there was strong distrust and concerns in the US Congress about cranes. And in 2024, the Biden administration issued an executive order to bolster maritime cybersecurity. And then after that, Biden administration also decided to impose 25 tariffs on port cranes that were becoming overly dependent on China. So these steps underscored that cybersecurity is becoming a core aspect of port security, and any port relying on networked system, which is virtually all major ports, should contend with threats ranging from ransomware attacks by criminals to potential cyber sabotage by rival states. So under severe US-China relations, seaports are on the front lines of an unseen cyber battleground. So seaports are huge physical, it's a complex system, but also behind the scenes, those cyber battlegrounds are concerns for many companies and also governments. So strengthening port resilience which includes hardening facilities, diversifying crane suppliers, and improving cybersecurity has become paramount to protect the economic security of supply chains. And actually, Japan has been collaborating with the US to bolster crane building capability in the US. Paseco, which is a US-based company, Paseco is planning to onshore US manufacturing capacity for its crane production. And Paseco is actually a subsidiary of a Japanese company, Mitsui Engineering and Shipbuilding, or Mitsui E&S. So the former US ambassador to Japan frequently mentioned the collaboration between the US government and the Mitsui as a sign of advanced US-Japan relationship. And so what is continued from the first Trump administration via Biden administration to the second Trump administration is that US concern about the Chinese national intelligence law enacted in 2017. And the Chinese national intelligence law requires Chinese citizens and organizations to assist in intelligence gathering activities. So from Huawei to cranes, the core issue is data security. So Huawei was the case of telecommunication, and similarly, the crane is the issue of collecting data on transportations and loading and unloading of containers. And so we now see the clear approach within the US government on the concerns on data. And also there was a concern about connected car. And also there was a concern about bioengineering. So connected car is like, it's quite similar to Huawei. So it's collecting data for all transportation. And also biodata is also the next battleground. So to conclude, I'd like to stress that in this age of geo-economic turbulence, we are facing numerous challenges. Ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, conflicts in Gaza and Yemen, and the Chinese civil military fusion, and now America first again. And I still believe that de-risking originated from Europe is a valid guiding principle to strike a balance between government missions to protect nations, and also a strike balance between government and also private entities' desire to expand business sustainable. So therefore, as I mentioned, private-public strategic dialogue is crucial to operationalize the concept. And to fulfill the vacuum in the international society, I believe Europe-Japan and Greece-Japan collaboration is critical to achieve the free and open Indo-Pacific and also maintain the calm Mediterranean Sea. So I thank you.
Well, thank you very much for a comprehensive review of and illustrated with examples also of what is going on today, or at least the last decade, and what are the risks and prospects in the near future. Let me immediately, because this is a high-tempo event, let me immediately call upon Sofia Galani, Kostas Tsimonis, and Yannis Trifilis to do we have micro? Do we have micro? Okay then. Okay. So Sofia Galani, a professor of in public international law, Pantheon University, formerly at Bristol University. We are extremely happy to have her here. According to the program, you've got 10 minutes. I didn't set this up, so.
Right, okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to the Embassy of Japan and to the Institute of International Relations for co-hosting this event. I will share a few thoughts about the Trump administration and ongoing and possible developments that concern sea lanes and maritime security. I think some of the points that I will raise fit very well with very important points that Mr. Sagara raised. Normally, I come to the discussion of maritime security from an international law perspective because of my background in international law. But today I thought that as the world order changes, it is necessary to try and get a sense of what's to come before we're able to evaluate what the law can or cannot do about these changes. I will focus my discussion on 4 areas, if I have the time: the Red Sea, the Panama and the Panama Canal, the Arctic and Greenland, and the Indo-Pacific. I'll start with the Red Sea, a sea lane that is of great importance to Greece, to Japan, mainly because it connects the Indo-Pacific with the Mediterranean Sea. What's important to note is that President Donald Trump redesigned the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization just on the 3rd day of his presidency. And he combined this action with a statement that had to do with his determination to exercise maximum pressure and impose new sanctions on Iran. The US has very strong interests in the region, both because they want to maintain the influence in the Middle East, but also because they're keen to keep the Red Sea lane open for maritime trade. The reality is that this is part of the US-China competition. China is Iran's biggest customer. Only in 2024, Iran exported 90% of their products to China, including oil, of course, and this income has been the greatest income for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. China initially backed the United Nations Security Council resolutions when the Houthis gained power in 2014. But after the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, following the war in Palestine, China has tried to water down the content of the Security Council resolutions, and it has distanced itself from the US position and the other partners and allies on the issue. Of course, it will be interesting to see what Russia will do. Russia is also a very important player in the Middle East, and I don't think that they're ready to depart from the region just in order to improve the US-Russian relations. But we've seen lately we're experiencing a kind of redistribution of the regions of the world between Russia and the UK and the US, sorry. So we'll have to wait and see what will happen there. And of course, it will be of interest to see how the UK, one of the key partners of the US in the region, and other European states will react, whether they will be keen to be part of the current cooperation coalition in the region after the attack of the US, and especially the Vice President of the US against European states. I think the reality is that Trump will remain active in the region. This is positive for maritime security because it's important for the Red Sea to remain open for navigation. Of course, there's concern because the more robust the position, the approach of the US is in the region, this makes peace in the region even more fragile. What about Panama? Trump said in the US Congress a couple of days ago that he will reclaim the canal. He said he's already doing that. This was rejected by Panama, but we have already seen that Panama, for example, was forced to not continue its cooperation with China as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And the Hong Kong-based company that had the control of 2 of the 5 ports in the region were forced to give up power to other companies. It is interesting that the neutrality treaty that is in place between Panama and the US, by which the US gave full power to Panama back in 1999. It allows the US to intervene in the interest of security, and they have the right to defend the canal. This includes use of force, and Panama has not excluded the possibility of using force. The question, of course, is what is the security risk that will justify such an action? Trump says national security. National security is, of course, linked with the US-China competition. The US warships do not really use the canal. Over the last 5 years, there have been 8 transits. Over the past 8 years, there have been only 5 warship transits. And the big US warships cannot transit the canal anyway because they're too large to do so. Trump is also upset because of the high fees for American vessels. There seems to be no discrimination between ships against the American ships. Fees have risen for a number of reasons, including expansion projects and because of climate change and drought that has forced fewer vessels to transit with less cargo. But Trump is not going to acknowledge climate change. He's against this idea. So obviously he wants to gain control over the canal purely for commercial reasons, because the canal remains important for cargo ships and energy. For example, we have a lot of transits of vessels carrying LNG. And if the US reclaims part of the canal or the canal, this will be great for the US interests, but I'm afraid that this will not be great for the rest of the ships that will want to transit, because then there will be discrimination between the ships transiting the canal. And what happens in Greenland and the Arctic? Trump said he will buy Greenland. It's not the first time. From a legal point of view, this is not possible. It is up to the indigenous people residing on the island to decide whether they want to become Americans. And I don't think that Denmark will just step down, because they do have control over foreign affairs and defense of the island. Trump says that Greenland is essential for national and international security. Again, from a security perspective, it is true that the Arctic has been a ground for competition between Russia and the US since the Cold War. After the war in Ukraine, they keep investing in military bases, in submarines, drones, vessels that are capable of operating in ice-covered areas. The Arctic cooperation has stopped since the war in Ukraine started. But again, there is a question whether the interest of Trump has to do with stopping Russia or, again, stopping China. China has been presenting itself as a near-Arctic state. It has forced very strong collaborations with Russia, and they keep investing in building ships that are capable of navigating the area. And China, and I think the US as well, they're not interested so much in security issues, as they're keen to explore the potential of the trans-Arctic route, which, again, because of climate change, may become accessible much sooner than we expected. And again, we certainly don't want to have the US controlling the area and the trans-Arctic route, because again, this will not be great for the interest of global maritime commerce. And finally, a couple of thoughts about the Indo-Pacific, and I will stop. Trump had always been interested to reduce the power of China in the region, and I think this will continue. The US have been conducting operations, patrol operations in the region in order to keep the South China Sea open for navigation. The South China Sea, the largest part, is being claimed by China on the basis of historic claims affecting the interests of neighboring states. I think this will continue, but it's highly unlikely that Trump will get involved in any sort of conflict to defend states in the region. I don't think he would be involved in a conflict to defend the Philippines or Vietnam, or even Taiwan, if things don't work very well between Taiwan and China. There is a question mark about what's going to happen with the Quad, the cooperation between the US, Australia, India, and Japan. The countries over the last years have expanded their agenda, including things about democracy, the rule of law, climate change. Again, I don't think that Trump will have any interest in continuing this kind of cooperation. He may be keen to continue cooperation in order to keep the Indo-Pacific free and open for navigation and for international trade, but again, we'll have to wait and see. So overall, what we're experiencing right now and what we expect is that the Trump administration will bring sweeping changes to sea lanes and to maritime commerce and to maritime security more general. And what worries me from a legal perspective is that the rules-based order that we kept relying upon, the rules-based order that Japan and Greece have been advocating for, have been relying upon, is fading. We're moving to a transactional-based order, where everything is based on economic interests. And of course, again, over the years, over the last years, we've seen that maritime security initiatives are based on bilateral or multilateral cooperation. And this is being weakened again, because Trump is moving away from cooperation and collaboration with states and international organizations. And it's really difficult to understand how things will move forward and what to expect. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Let me straight away invite Mr. Yannis Trifilis, member of the Board of Directors, the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping, and let me also express my gratitude for his willingness and readiness to contribute to today's event. You have the floor.
Thank you, Professor. Your kind words. It's always a pleasure to be in an environment like EDIS and like Eliamet, where I'm also on the advisory board. And it does show that the relation between geopolitics, geoeconomics, as the earlier speaker clearly illustrated, and shipping is very close. I was fortunate to have studied international relations at Harvard in the 90s, so instead of doing engineering and business that most of my colleagues were doing. So let's say that history has rewarded this different track for me. So I would like, first of all, to present a bit the basic numbers around Greek shipping. It's the leading fleet in the world with over 4,000 vessels. Most importantly, it's the leading privately owned fleet in the world, which means it's quite independent in the way it operates. It's the world's biggest cross-trading fleet, so we only carry 2% of our own cargo. We carry cargoes for everybody else. Primarily the world's largest economies, EU, the US, China, and Japan. And we carry between 30 to 50% of the sensitive materials into all of these economies. And we represent more than 60% of the EU capacity. So that's shipping. Shipping is based, Greek shipping has become this successful model of operation in serving world trade since accelerating pace since the Second World War, but initial pace with the fading out of the large empires, Ottoman Empire and the English Empire that dominated the trade routes. It took us a long time as a collective to individually penetrate this network of trade, but by the First World War, Greek shipping was already an established force operating out of London, slowly wrestled control of the Atlantic trade down to South America. From there, expanded through the Suez to Asia, had a big setback, of course, during the Second World War, decimated as a fleet from close to 1,000 to just over a few hundred ships with several thousand seamen killed. Back then we had our own people on our own ships and even from our own islands and villages. You'll meet many mafiosos because these were names that were reproduced as they were lost at sea. And then after the Second World War, we have the major acceleration. We have advents like the flags of convenience and the free registries. These are designed as the flip side of the new world trade architecture, a shift to the private initiative, but also an awareness of liability and the need to navigate the Cold War disconnection between the parts of the world. Greek fleet was both, the fluid connecting separate parts, but also the glue, keeping a lot of things together. Our mantra was free and fair competition, level playing field, freedom of navigation. We pursue quality and reliability in our services. And of course, we partner with the best in the world, whether it's for insurance, banking, building, etc. It's an open architecture in which the individual company takes on a disproportionate amount of risk that economic theory would not normally allow individuals or smaller corporations to undertake. This way we navigate the sea, and we have successfully contributed 270 billion to the local economy. Now, as was stated very clearly in the previous presentations, I think we've gone beyond the turbulence into the transition. I think the turbulence preceded the transition, and this was evident even a few years ago. It never crystallized because events like COVID, even events like the credit crisis earlier, interceded in the normal flow that we are seeing now, taking an accelerated pace, because like the roller coaster, it's been holding back and now it's moving very fast. I don't think, sadly, that this rules-based world order, it had become very hollowed out. It didn't represent the reality on the ground of the world. My dear friend Rudendra knows this. We've discussed it also with Maria Gavunelli, Inoa Fendouli, Thanasis Platias, and even you, Dr. Ifandis. Last year seemed to be a limit point, and the entry of Trump into the administration has basically just made this official. It was a common secret. This is now a new reality. I appreciate a lot your comments moving from just in time to just in case. In shipping, we believe in redundancy, and this is why we are slightly more incompatible with the capital markets and the stock market, which demands a very quick efficiency. In shipping, we anticipate the unexpected, we account for it, and we use the Roman unus nullus, one is none. So we always have, two anchors, two radars, even, sort of two captains with a deputy. And I think this is what the world needs now. We need to move away in general from just in time to just in case. We need to have two allies, two routes, two plans. This steady as she goes time is over. And I'm detecting a number of rifts in the world system, gaps that are being created like curtains had risen in the past, and some question marks. Let's talk a bit about the question mark. Now, there was some discussion about what was the thinking of the US and this abrupt change. I think it's called the reverse Nixon. It's basically they're doing everything they can now to adapt a strategy that was available to them many years ago. They chose not to because of this market pressure and the desire to be over-efficient and not to concede that a second route can be useful. In this reverse Nixon, they are willing to tempt Russia with virtually everything available to them, including, possibly parts of Europe, or an acquiescence to a regionalization of the world to spheres of influence. When Trump came out and talked about Panama and Greenland, obviously it's about isolating the Atlantic basin from the rest of the world, creating a closed circuit there, isolating the Arctic, isolating, the shortest link to the Pacific. The south route from Patagonia is obviously very tough to navigate, and it's already controlled by the Chinese huge port developments in Chile. and further down. But this there are a number of other. Sorry, I lost a bit my train of thought because these are quite new events. But yes, it was not just about controlling these areas. It was also signaling, Aaron, that if China were to move into Taiwan, the US would have now two options. It would no longer be outright the defense of Taiwan, which had been until now the base scenario, but in fact, I suspect it was a threat that then we will proceed to take other territories. And instead of wasting our energy defending, we will attack and we will take advantage of the unraveling of the world order. So the rest of the world is suffering the tragedy of the commons, which is that everybody wants to get there first. And this is now a new situation through which shipping is looking at things. Greek shipping has always adapted. We're not too worried about the changing trade routes, the tariffs. For instance, Canadian crude will now have to go away from the US. This is a great news for Greek tankers, of which we control a third in the world. But the problem is if we do go into, all-out war, or if we go into very big power competition, then Greek shipping will be caught in the middle. It won't only be caught in the middle as a leg in the trading link or as a link in the trading chain, but also because now Greek shipping, by virtue of the closer nexus between corporations and policy, a new era ushered in after 2000, but embraced very much by the EU and the US and accelerated during the too big to fail credit crisis, and then later again by the subsidies of COVID only to big corporations. Big corporations and even supranational organizations have tried to carve agendas that can be not only symbiotic, but also win-win. The Green Deal was a classic example of this attempt. It's also unraveling. But the trouble is that this brought Greek shipping under not the purview, but under the closer connection to the Greek state and to the EU. And the EU has interfered a lot in the way that the Greek fleet operates, demanding quotas on flags, examining a lot of the legal framework that has served the EU so well, being its only field of international excellence. I should add, I think even automotive is no longer there. So we are concerned that between plying the oceans that are dominated by the US and China and how they will relate to one another, we are receiving orders from the EU and we are receiving different signals from the market. And in setting a course, that makes it very difficult. And this is a risk to Greek shipping from these big shifts. And I hope that, Greek shipping is left a bit more neutral, because the ocean is a neutral space, and those plying the oceans need to be similar to the element which has kept them afloat and successful. And I think the EU should realize that the strength of its fleet and the Greek fleet is its ability to its fluidity. And I think if you make that rigid, it can add to the problem instead of adding to the solution. So I hope this was a view from something not so military, but something very connected to what's going on in the world. Thank you very much.
Well, it's let me tell you, it's quite exciting. The quality and the stimulation of the presentation so far. The tragedy of the commons and the big question, who provides the public goods, if there is anyone to provide the public goods. But you should coin a new term, or maybe we should co-coin it. Geoshipping. Let me
Working on geoceanic.
Okay. Okay, let me now invite our third and last discussant, Professor Konstantinos Simonis, King's College London and Pantheon University, and also the head of our China program here at IDIS. Konstantinos.
Thank you, Professor Fandis. I would like to thank the Ambassador Ito and his wonderful team in the Embassy of Japan, and also to thank our great IDIS colleagues, so Fentuli, Maria Deca, Popilaina, and their team, that they managed to pull off such a successful event in a very difficult day, as there are demonstrations taking place now in Syntagma Square. Now, I will share some thoughts on East Asian security, and particularly on the challenge of China, which I believe is the elephant in the room. Now, in East Asia, for many decades, we have had this phenomenon of simultaneous strong regionalization, so economic integration, but weak regionalism, so weak institutions. ASEAN is perhaps the most successful result of regionalist efforts, but it does not compare in terms of the proximity to blocs such as the EU. Now, this mirrors the reality that has characterized the region of cold politics and hot economics. Now, this arrangement for a very long time has been sustained by the US hub and spoke system of security in East Asia. So essentially having the US at the center, and then security arrangements with Korea, Japan, and also security commitments to Taiwan. Now, however, in this period, and especially after the end of the Cold War, we have, or the end of the Cold War I, we have the rise of China, of the People's Republic of China, as the primary source of growth, but also the primary source of insecurity in East Asia. Now, there is a geoculturalist argument from the PRC that the People's Republic has never engaged in a war, and that's because the notion of Confucian leadership gives emphasis on cooperation and leading by example and not coercion. Of course, this is absolutely not true. This is just a discourse. We just need to have a look at the small-scale wars, but wars with India and Vietnam, the continuous preparations for the invasion of Taiwan. Okay, we will have extensive military drills on that. We can see the expansionism in South China Sea with the creation of essentially bases of coral reefs, and of course in East China Sea or the Okinawa Sea around the issue of the Senkaku Islands. Now, slogans are very important in Chinese politics, and they are very helpful for us to make sense of what the leadership is thinking. So Xi Jinping has been referring to two things. The first is the so-called Zhongguomeng, the Chinese dream. Okay, and the key component of the Chinese dream is what he called the Zhonghua Minzhu Weida Fuxing, which is the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Now, this great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation has economic, of course, dimensions. It has technological dimensions, like in leadership, but is also rampant with revisionism. Okay, for many, we could say that China's dream is actually a nightmare. Now, the key problem that I would like to talk about is China's continuous manipulation and politicization of emotions when it comes to its differences in East Asia. So we have nationalism and legitimacy, but also a continuous mobilization of emotions and feelings around supposed obligations of greatness that the Chinese regime needs to fulfill. And this has a great impact, of course, on territorial disputes, and in particular how the politics of emotions and their implications in regional security, they make things very difficult, if not impossible, to resolve. And this also negates any kind of rationalist approaches to solving some of those problems. Now, and of course, what the key here is how this manipulation of emotions actually limits space for compromise from the Chinese side. Okay. When we have differences, and in this country we have differences with our neighbors as well, we all know that a kind of compromise will be inevitable if we are ever going to solve our differences. But in this case, the manipulation of over decades of feelings, of emotions around those differences makes things almost impossible to resolve. Now, there is a growing literature in international relations on emotions, how they impact perception, policy making and behavior, how they are exploited and manipulated by political actors to gain certain goals, but also, and that's I think the most problematic, how these emotions have a life of their own. Once you start manipulating, you can't stop doing that. They become part of someone else's perception and way of thinking. So the case of the CCP is very characteristic of its use of made-up emotional obligations and entitlements to frame the interests of China in East Asia as historical rights. Okay. I'd not refer here to a simple manipulation of emotion, but the establishment of frames in the policy-making system within society on how to interpret policy decisions. Now, of course, this goes back to the 1980s and the realization of the Chinese Communist Party that there is no ideological ground here, right? So they needed to invent a new set of ideology, and of course they resorted to nationalism, which was always there in order to build legitimacy. The emphasis on the century of humiliation, and again, essentially it uses memory to export domestic problems through scapegoating and tactical victimization. It is characteristics that every time China undergoes a crisis, be that domestic or foreign, it's always someone else to blame. Now, state nationalism, so the official kind of discourse, has been fueling popular nationalism. But popular nationalism in China, so the way the Chinese people understand understand nationalism, understand China and its place in the world, are two things that we can distinguish. Now, under Xi Jinping, they have both become increasingly xenophobic. Taiwan, South China Sea, East China Sea, or the Sea of Okinawa, there are different problems, but they share one commonality of having acquired a high emotional load for the Chinese people. And of course, Japan is very often singled out because there is a well-embedded frame of anti-Japaneseness. I always say to my students that when I was living in China, any time of the day, you would open the TV, one of the TV channels would have a documentary or a movie about the Japanese invasion of China and World War II. So they are bombarded continuously with anti-Japanese sentiments. Now, can we reason with such a global power? Can we reason with China? Yes, to a certain extent. But we also need, and the reason we can reason is because they have a soft spot. And the soft spot is that when we actually talk about China, we are referring to the Chinese Communist Party. So for them, regime security, so political stability, is above everything. Okay. So this imposes limits to adventurism, but East Asian nations need to think of their collective security. There is, the time has come to start thinking in collective terms, especially because the commitment of the US, I'm more optimistic than my colleagues. I think it will still be there. However, we must learn that we cannot rely on one power for our security forever. Okay. Now, So Mr. Sagara, I will finish with this. Mr. Sagara made the key connection, and I really like that he brought together the two ends of Eurasia. And he kept repeating this idea that what happens in Ukraine, what happens in East Asia, they are links there. And so the defense against Russian imperialism and Chinese revisionism, there are things that they are closely interlinked. Now, this is an idea that we need to build more on, to think of ways of exchange information, collaborate. There are issues of cybersecurity, technological security, but also traditional forms of security that we need to take more seriously and work together on those. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. As I said, the tempo is high. We have not that much violated the schedule, so I think we have ample time for discussion, further discussion. Let me invite questions or brief comments, please. Brief comments. Thanasi, Professor Platias, and then Professor Gavunelli, the Director General of ELIAMEP.
Professor Fatis, congratulations for organizing this very interesting seminar. A short comment. I mean, if you read McKinter, he connected already for the beginning of the 20th century the east part of Eurasia with the west, so that's not new. Two questions. I was very much intrigued by the comment of Professor Galani that the Trump administration is ready to give up Taiwan. What's the position of Japan on that, and what you are going to do if this scenario takes place? I mean, if China invades and the Americans don't defend Taiwan. So that's the first question. The second is addressed to Mr. Strifilis. He talked about the challenges that the Greek industry is facing. One recent development is the port fee that the Americans are thinking on imposing on Chinese-built ships. And as we know, the Greeks have built a lot of their ships, not only in Japan and Korea, but also in Japanese shipyards, so it will affect them. Could you comment about what will be the impact if this kind of fee is being implemented? Thank you.
Professor Gavunelli.
And thank you for this very, very interesting discussion and the initiative. A comment and a query. The comment has to do with this discussion about making America great again or looking back into the future in Chinese terms. Do I sense this resurrection of myths? And if I just put the Russian Empire on top of that, I do have a feeling that we are now operating beyond the realms of reality into a make-believe kind of world. And my concern is that we're doing so to the detriment of the successful world we have built in these past 3 generations. I mean, there's no economic point at the end of the day in playing with tariffs, so, imposing them and then unimposing and creating havoc along the way. That really has an impact on maritime trade. It has an impact on sea lanes, pretty much as Sophia had indicated earlier. It has an impact also on critical infrastructure. And I would like to know, Mr. Sagara, why the ports were actually taken out from the initial understanding of critical infrastructure. It strikes me as really weird, but no doubt you are going to respond to that. I do have a comment to and a query for my friend Yanis Trifilis. Yes, it is true that this country has relied on our shipping time and again over the centuries. And that is absolutely true, that it has helped us survive through difficult times. On the other hand, we do invest quite a lot trying to protect our maritime routes, not as a country, but as a European Union as a whole. I would just refer to ASPIDES. It seems to me, therefore, that there must be some kind of balance between regulation on the one hand, coming from the European Union under the present circumstances, and the needs of the market. And I find it very, very difficult to understand how these two would remain far away from each other for a period of time. May I just bring in the example of the dark fleet, or the parallel fleet, as we call it these days. Every time there is a discussion about sanctions and whatnot, I keep reminding everyone who wants to hear that, as a lawyer, I can come up with an amazing system of sanctions within the next 10 minutes. That would be totally and completely irrelevant unless you talk to the shipping people and you take into consideration realities, I would say in the field, but it's not really in the field, in the seas. Let me put it like this. Thank you so very much.
Okay, let me start by giving the floor to Mr. Sagar.
Yep.
Thank you.
So thank you for your comments on questions. So on Taiwan, so as I mentioned, the narrowest part of Taiwan Strait is 130 kilometers. But between the Yonaguni Island, which is the most southwest part of Japan, and Taiwan is just 110 kilometers. So any incidents around the Taiwan Strait is the issue for Japan. And also here, issue is that China has been, promoting the idea of fast island chain. So which is starting from Japan to Taiwan and the Philippines and also Vietnam. So I think the challenge in East Asia is that the collaboration between Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and also South Korea. Because if anything happens around Taiwan Strait, it can be complex crisis, which means that China could coordinate with Russia and North Korea. And so Russia may do some military drills in the Okhotsk Sea, and also North Korea may be launching missiles towards the Japan Sea. And during the crisis, China may start from conducting cyber attacks and may do have some very severe disruption. So I think what Japan can do is to promote the coordination among countries. And actually, current Japanese government has been working with Taiwan and the Philippines on the collaboration on Coast Guard. So collaboration among military is a little bit difficult because we don't have the military agreement, but still, Coast Guard collaboration is possible. So that's what Japan has been trying to do with other countries. And responding to the comments on critical infrastructure, and also we see some weird and unpredictability among Trump administration. So I just want to quickly mention 4 observations on the Trump administration. One is that, of course, we know that Trump administration is pursuing the America first, which is a unilateralism. I also see Trump first, and which is opportunism. So Trump first, sometimes opposite from the America first, or making America great again. So we need to think that, and we may need to, or when I talk with American think tankers, I always talk that, make America great again. So it's been 4 years by Trump administration. Is America is respected, or did America make great again? So I think it's very difficult situation, but the Trump first opportunism is the reality right now, and it's transactional, we see now. And the second is that it's relating to the comment on rule of law. So Japan has been promoting rule of law, which is quite a liberal concept, and with other European countries and also allies and like-minded countries. what China has been persuading is rule by law. So rule is made by governors or the CCP. And it's quite interesting to see that now the President Trump is issuing many executive orders. So the second Trump administration looks like quite close to Xi Jinping's rule by law. So that's the second point. Third is that Trump was successful businessman who ran real estate business. But the current Trump administration's approach is kind of just looking at profit loss. It seems that they are not looking at balance sheet. And then instead, Trump administration is utilizing its assets built over the previous 80 years. And also Trump is utilizing US credibility to persuade his own belief, I would say. So the fourth is that still we do need US leadership. So that's why Japan and the European collaboration is really important to bring US leadership back. So it all relates to maintain the international order and also to restore the international public goods. And so it's really important to stress the US and also Europe and Japan collaboration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trifilis.
So thank you. There were some great questions. I'll do my best, but I wanted, in terms of an introduction, to say last week we had the pleasure of the Chinese ambassador at the Marine Club and the Korean ambassador at the Propeller Club, a further indication of the importance of shipping and maritime lanes and the restructuring of even the US projection of power on the oceans, which is very much manifesting itself in South Korea at the moment. So there is a big link in this in the issues being discussed. When I asked the Chinese ambassador what would happen if the EU perceived the Sino-Russian alliance as a threat, potentially, because this, as I said earlier, is of concern to Greek shipping, because, as I said earlier, the EU is now taking a view on how its fleet should address, and you touched on that, and I'll touch on that a bit more later. There was no answer, obviously, because it's an unfair question to make. There are too many hypotheticals. Let's say it's a bit loaded. But the only answer that came out coherently, and Kostis Frangoulis is here and certainly noted it, is that China comes in peace. We trade with everyone. We don't have any problem, as long as it's the one China policy. And he was very clear about that. And that was almost like, as long as you let us do what we want, we'll be happy with everyone. But that is a problem, because you cannot treat the world in such a transactional manner, and it's very open-ended, because that's the agenda today, then tomorrow maybe it's another agenda. You cannot have freedom of trade and freedom of navigation contingent on any single one national policy, whether you're the EU, whether you're China, or whether you're the US. And that's my answer to you, Maria, is there's a wonderful clip by Milton Friedman. It lasts 2 minutes. I had it to show it. I'm not allowed to, and it's correct to keep the conversation going, but he just raises a pencil and talks 2 minutes about the pencil, and he says nobody made this pencil by decree, by command, yet the pencil exists, and it's got, more than 50 or 80 chemicals in it, and it's made in several parts of the world, and everybody comes together through the invisible hand of the market to construct it. So shipping serves the pencil, Maria. It doesn't serve the EU, and it doesn't serve the US, and it doesn't serve China. And this is a misconception that's going on. Also, it's a misconception that shipping is protected by anyone. Shipping is protected by the balance of regulation and the balance of everyone to be able to ship stuff around as cheaply as possible and feed massive populations and power their economies with the least drag. That's what's keeping shipping together, just as the pencil is kept together. It's an invisible force and a very universal force. It's got nothing to do, in my opinion, with Aspides. That's about the EU projecting power in a place it would not have been able to project power and wouldn't have a relevance in projecting power apart from the fact that vessels of EU relation happen to flow through there, carrying stuff for everybody else. So I think the only way to keep these aligned is to keep the IMO and to keep the global regulator in charge of a level playing field, and to try and not to, what's it called? It's called cross-selling in marketing, but to interconnect, not to make linkages and interconnections between the shipping industry and regional politics, because this will just regionalize shipping. And if shipping is regionalized, we will end up, just as the Mediterranean fleet ended up all the way down to 1/10 of what it used to be, if we become an Atlantic shipping instead of a global shipping, we will disappear. Θα γίνουμε πορθμία. Okay, so we're strong because we fight and we stay fit all the time. We've never wanted protection, but we also don't want to atrophy and be put to be controlled. We're to be free to throw off the energy that comes into us. That's the position of the industry, and we're a free market industry. Like I said, in a corporatist world, the free market is slightly out of vogue, but it's more resilient because it's more diverse and it's more bottom-up than top-down. So my money is always on the free market and the free individual, rather than on transient stages. We've had Smoot-Hawley and we've had, tariffs and these things before, and they come and they go. The global consumer is the leader of the world, and we serve him. Well, it was created by states in order to ensure that the consumer would benefit. Okay? Now, Mr. Platias, a very specific question to which there is no specific answer. Okay? It's a bit like that unfair question I made to the ambassador. It's quite hypothetical. But I sit on the board of an insurance company, mutual insurance company, and I have been flagging that for over 6 years, and we have been discussing it for over 3 years. So it is not that it's coming out of the blue. Maybe we did not discuss the specific tariff, but we did discuss the great power competition, and we did discuss that just as there can be tariffs on flags or cargoes, there can be tariffs on shipyards. It could be good for Greek shipping. It could be good for Greek shipping because it could withdraw capacity. It could be good because it could create disruptions. But whether we can make the most of it or not, it is not something that we like to see. We like to see the options to buy any car you want if you're a taxi driver, including the BYD electric car, which is abnormally priced for the Greek and the European consumer. And it's the same in shipping. We choose the Japanese vessels because they are the best quality in the world. But sometimes, especially when the market is hot, they take 4 to 5 years to deliver. If you go to Korea, they won't touch the commodity shipping because they only do value-added vessels. So what do? What's a poor owner to do? You go to China. NYK ordered ships in China today. So, and I would say that looking at it from far, China and Japan may have a more complementary relation than maybe with South Korea, which is the US creating a lot of trouble in that region. So I think that we will see some punitive action against, let's say, Chinese interests by the US. Whether it will be long-lived, whether it will be alongside the tariffs or not, we will see. I don't think it will reshape the shipping industry. Right now, a lot of people are not trading to the US on China-built ships until it's clear what will happen. Now, I don't know I think that covers these things more or less. Thank you.
Well, thanks, sir. Milton Friedman is, of course, a legend. Okay, Chicago, but as a Kennedy School, maybe you should have looked at the next door Department of Economics. No, I'm joking.
I didn't study at the Kennedy School.
No?
I studied at the Harvard College. I did 4 years of training, not 2.
Again, next door. The economics department was next door. and Professor Goldin and the rest. The more... Sophia? No? Constantine? Okay, let me take the next couple of questions, please. Identify yourself, please, for the
Hello. Before I actually have no questions. From Taiwan, so I would just like to make a small, short comment about the question that was just raised by the professor. Of course, the possibility of China invading Taiwan exists, but for Taiwan, just like Japan, we try to promote peace. We try to promote peaceful resolution of any disputes. So we try to minimize the possibility of that scenario that may really happens by our 4Ds. And this is something I always share with my Greek friends. For Taiwan, we have, first of all, we have defense. According to the Global Firepower Index 2025, Taiwan's military strength is actually 22nd largest in the world. So we have our defense and we have our deterrence capability. Because for Taiwan Strait, it is not only about Taipei or our Taichung or Kaohsiung, the cities in the central part, in the southern part. Across the strait on the other side, there's Shanghai, there's Xiamen, there's Hong Kong. So we have our deterrence capability based on asymmetric military projection power. And the third is, of course, the democratic alliance, including from Japan to the Philippines, from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. And we believe democracy is a value that should never be given up, and we should always stick to and try to make it stronger and stronger. And the last D is our determination of our people, which can be seen from the presidential election turnout, always more than 70%. That proves the democratic system in Taiwan is strong, and the determination of the 23 Taiwanese people is always there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, please.
Mr. Sagar, you mentioned how important it is for Japan to diversify and de-risk supply chains, and that Japan started to fund businesses divergent from specific markets. So do you think it is possible to incentivize private businesses to change sources of supply if they're simply cheaper or more easily available without hurting the businesses? And how can you support this process?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So, as I mentioned, the supply chain management is slightly changing from just in time to just in case. And COVID was the wake up call. And I think for Japanese companies, I see huge sea change over the past 2 years. So 2 years ago, when I talk to the Japanese companies, and we have big business in China, we cannot, exit from China. And right now, still, China is a very important partner for Japan. So that's why I mentioned de-risking. So we need to focus on what's the exact risk and to identify risks and then to make some plan B or to diversify to avoid that risk. And so Japanese companies are taking very, for example, in Chinese business, Japanese companies are working with Chinese coworkers who learn Japanese. And because we have many, many friends in China who studied and also lived in Japan. And also that kind of collaboration is still existing. And also de-risking is important. But I think one big event for Japan was that the detention of Japanese workers in China, because the reason was unclear. So that's why we see the huge sea change in 2 years. But still, as I mentioned, I'm not saying that we need to, it's not a zero-sum game. How we can expand the business and then make peace and prosperity with China is very challenging, but that's the problem is we have to work on with China.
Thank you very much. I think it's time to wrap it up. It was a great event, I think. Thank you very much for your participation. Again, our gratitude goes to the Japanese Embassy and to His Excellency Ambassador Ito. Please keep visiting the Institute's websites as we are trying, and we will keep trying to raise the quality of our discussions and events, and to fight against the provincial nature of our public sphere. The EDIS China program is our flagship program. We are planning to expand. I think it is safe. It is also part of our university strategy. University EDIS strategy is also the hopefully the launch of our new master's program in collaboration with Columbia University, the East Asia Institute, an English-speaking program. Hopefully, in the next couple of years, we will be ready to. The agreement has been signed, and this again will be a breakthrough, I think, in the study of the most important region in the world. Okay. Well, thank you very much.